Hello students, in my previous video I discussed up to cases of food and wine and I talked about afterlife. So let me continue now from the next line. After months of carefully recording the pharaoh's funerary treasures, Carter began investigating his three nested coffins. Opening the first, he found a shroud or a blanket adorned with garlands of willow and olive leaves, wild celery, lotus petals, and cornflowers. The faded evidence of a burial in March or April, because these flowers they actually blossom during the month of March or April. When he finally reached the mummy, though he ran into trouble, the ritual resins had hardened, cementing tart to the bottom of his solid gold coffin. Here I quote, "No amount of legitimate force could move them." Carter wrote later what was to be done. In some of my other videos also I talked about these ritual resins, the chemical substance that tightly fixed the mummy with the coffin. It was very difficult to take out the mummy from the coffin. One thing can be done, and that is what they did. They chisel out the parts, the body parts of the mummy. The sun can beat down like a hammer this far south in Egypt, and Carter tried to use it to loosen the resins. For several hours, he set the mummy outside in blazing sunshine that heated it to 149 degrees Fahrenheit. Nothing burst means nothing happened. He reported with scientific detachment that the consolidated material had to be chiseled. I talked about this chiseling previously also, from beneath the limbs and trunk before it was possible to raise the king's remains. In his defense, Carter really had little choice. If he hadn't cut the mummy free, thieves most certainly would have circumvented the guards and ripped it apart to remove the gold. In Tart's time, the royals were fabulously wealthy, and that is the reason the funeral ceremony was a magnum opus in case of King Tut, because he was the last heir of a glorious dynasty. So his funeral ceremony was being conducted in a very lavish and royal manner. In Tart's time, the royals were fabulously wealthy, and they thought or hoped they could take their riches with them. For his journey to the great beyond, that is, from the world of the living to the afterlife, great beyond, King Tut was lavished with glittering goods. Glittering means something that sparks, something that is very much shining. Precious collars, inlaid necklaces and bracelets, rings, amulets, a ceremonial apron, sandals, sheaths for his fingers and toes, and the now iconic inner coffin and marks, all of pure gold. To separate Tut from his adornments, Carter's men removed the mummy's head and severed nearly every major joint. Severed means removed. Severed every major joint. Once they had finished, they reassembled. Reassembled means they, after the experiment was done, then again they reassembled the body parts. After the jewelry were taken out, they again reassembled or reorganized, we can say, the remains on a layer of sand in a wooden box with padding that concealed the damage, the bed where Tut now rests. Then after using some paddings, then finally again Tut was being laid down to rest in his coffin. Change in archaeology happened over the years, and this paragraph starts with that line. Archaeology has changed substantially in the intervening decades, focusing less on treasure and more on the fascinating or interesting details of life and intriguing mysteries of death. It also uses more sophisticated tools, including medical technology. And here only, dear students, you will get to know that in 1968, an anatomy professor made a discovery that the breastbone and the front ribs in case of King Tut were found to be missing. So see, it is written here. In 1968, More than 40 years after Carter's discovery, an anatomy professor x-rayed the mummy and revealed a startling fact. Beneath the resin that cakes his chest, his breastbone and front ribs are found missing. Today, diagnostic imaging can be done with computed tomography or CT scan, by which hundreds of X-rays in cross-section are put together like pieces of bread, or we can say slices of bread, to create a three-dimensional virtual body. And finally, a three-dimensional virtual body can be set up on the computer screen. And could it answer two of the biggest questions still lingering about him? But still, two of the biggest questions regarding him still linger. Number one, how did he die? And number two, how old was he at the time of his death? King Tut's demise was a big event, even by royal standards. He was the last of his family line, and his funeral was the death rattle of a dynasty. I already told you he was the last of his family in his family, so his funeral ceremony was being performed in a very lavish manner. But the particulars of his passing away and its aftermath are unclear. But how he died, in which way, or under which circumstances he died, all these are practically unclear.